It's been almost 3 months now since Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country following weeks of mass demonstrations led by students. Many of them described Hasina's rule as autocratic. Following her ouster, some in Bangladesh's creative scene feel empowered to make use of their freedom and engage again in political satire.
Political cartoons like these were nowhere to be seen in Bangladesh's mainstream media while Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was still in power. Cartoonist Mehdi Haq says he and his colleagues largely refrained from depicting top political leaders during Hasina's 15-year tenure.
There
was a kind of legal embargo on drawing political cartoons. There were some vague definitions under the Digital Security Act, which lives on as the Cyber Security Act. There were fears we would be in danger if we drew something critical. It triggered the worst kind of censorship, what we call self-censorship.
Hundreds of critics of Hasina's government, including cartoonists, were arrested and prosecuted for their work. But then, Hasina fled after a popular uprising in August. Many artists again felt empowered to exercise their creative freedom.
We saw about 500 cartoons drawn in 15 to 20 days. It was direct satire, and it was not amateur work. If we wanted to write the history of political cartoons, it would be a significant chapter.
Press freedom in Bangladesh has declined in recent years. The organization Reporters Without Borders ranked it 165th out of 180 countries in its 2024 World Press Freedom Index. Analysts say Bangladesh is just at the beginning of its efforts to improve press freedom.
For press freedom, there needs to be certain reforms, right, of the Digital Security Act or Cyber Security Act, of the various laws that define what is defamation and sedition and things like that, what constitutes going against the Constitution, what constitutes going against the 4 pillars of the Constitution. All of these things are criminal offenses on the part of journalists or anyone writing, even writing on social media. So coming out of that would mean these laws actually need to change.
Mehdi Haq has called for the restrictive laws to be repealed. That's under consideration, with Bangladesh's new interim government now reviewing them.
DW reporter Binish Javed joins us now. She just returned from an assignment in Bangladesh and joins us here. Good to see you, Binish. When it comes to freedom of expression in Bangladesh, what has changed since the ousting of the government earlier this year?
Terry, the situation has definitely dramatically changed. You can feel it the moment you enter Bangladesh. I spoke to a lot of people, journalists, students, people from government, ordinary Bangladeshis, and many people told me that for example, simple thing like posting criticism on social media. This is basic criticism. They were not, they didn't feel comfortable criticizing the government or any government institutions or the security forces on social media. So all of a sudden, you see a lot of people, young people, expressing their anger, expressing their emotions on social media. Then there was a political analyst, for example, who told me that now in Bangladesh, all of a sudden, there are seminars happening. There are discussions happening about how Bangladesh can move towards democracy, what would be the role of security forces, what kind of changes the constitution should have. All of these discussions were very difficult to have under the rule of Sheikh Hasina. And that change, we see television channels, for example, are also most of the television channels and media in Bangladesh was inclined towards the former government. And now you see a lot of talk shows where you have guests who are also even criticizing the interim government. So dramatic change. All of a sudden, it feels like a very suppressed society is coming out, speaking up their thoughts and their opinions.
During the previous government, the student-led movement was pretty severely repressed with violence also by the security forces. Are those involved in that movement, that student-led movement, able to really express themselves without fear of persecution now?
So some of them are now working with the interim government. So we see a very active role of the student protesters. But Terry, what is very interesting is the moment you enter Dhaka, on the walls, you see this expression of students in forms of beautiful, colorful murals. Maybe our viewers, we can show that some of the pictures to our viewers. For example, you can see this one, freedom. This one, for example, is a criticism to the security forces which were involved in brutal crackdown of the students. And the criticism is also that even if they were doing it on the orders of the government, they still had the power to resist. So these kind of messages the students are sharing in these very colorful, beautiful murals that you see around Dhaka. And this is the kind of expression you see. You feel that they were repressed. All of a sudden, on the walls, you see criticism of the former government, but also a message to the future leader that they want Bangladesh where people, like even if they're Hindus, Muslims, and people of other religions, they all should be part of the society, should be treated equally. So you see a lot of these kind of messages, basically, I think, addressing to the future leaders of the government.
So the cityscape of Dhaka is changing as a result of all this, but not everything has been resolved when it comes to freedom of expression in Bangladesh. What we heard from a political scientist in that report there, what still needs to change in order to really assure basic fundamental rights?
Bangladesh has one of the most repressive laws when it comes to freedom of expression and also freedom of press. And that needs to change. The law still exists. And what we see on the ground is because there's so much of a political division, political polarization. So what we see, and Reporters Without Borders say that journalists who were more supportive of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, now they are facing charges. Some of them are facing charges because of these laws. So the government says that they are taking action. They have, for example, asked that if somebody is charged, they will not be arrested. And there has to be a fair investigation. But the government is now going through a regressive process of judicial reforms, of also reforming the media, reforming laws that can accommodate more freedom of press in the society. And therefore, the interim government has a critical and crucial role to play right now to make sure that no journalist is unfairly targeted.
Exciting time for Bangladesh. Benish, thank you so much. That was our reporter, Benish Javed.